Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Last week, we fixed the ride quality on my V8 Mercedes E550 by replacing the front air struts, and we stopped it from becoming an unintentional lowrider by tracking down a pretty bad air leak. Now, for the last few months, the car's been a little slow to start, sometimes stumbling while cranking before eventually getting started. Now, this is usually a sign of the starter starting to fail, and it's one of those bits of preventative maintenance that keeps you from being stuck on the side of the road. Sure, it might seem okay to just leave the starter for later since it still starts the car, but it's only fine until it isn't. Once your starter goes out, the car's pretty much stuck, and either you're lucky and it's stuck in your garage, or you're calling for a tow truck. So today, we're replacing the starter because I don't like the odds of this thing being in the garage when it decides to pack it in. So, let's get to it. So we have the car up in the air. We're gonna go see what we need to do to get to the starter. Okay. All right, well, good news is we just found the starter. It's right there. And we know that we need to get this section of the exhaust off, which runs back to here over there. And under that bar. Okay. To get a good workspace in here, especially when we were to deal with the exhaust, I'm going to take this panel off, which is held in here. I think it loops around here, there. Same thing over here, up there, and here, but also this panel which goes over it in the front, so there, here, and then 4 at the front here. Oh, this is center jack point. Oh, look at those beautiful brand new struts. Okay, I'm going to get started on getting these off. These are 8mm. Alright. Yes, no. Oh, there's 2 more. So tucked away right here. Behind the sway bar. Same thing over here, right there. With the panels out of the way, we can see where the starter is. We have fairly good access to it from the back, looking up along the exhaust, but we can also see it looking from the front by the steering column. So we've got things we need to be aware of. There's 2 mounting nuts here because there's little captive studs. On the flange, there's 1 bolt there. So 1 there, and 1 there. We've got our O2 sensor there that follow the green wire comes right here. We got the one that's in the cat, the black wire, and that comes right here. And then as we go further back, follow the exhaust. Right here, there's an E-Torx clamp, and we'll be taking that off too. We'll also have to take this bar out of the way, which seems like it goes, yep, so there's a little hole here. Got a seat there. And then there's another one here, another one here, and then right there, another hole. So, should be able to get that out of the way, so we can drop the exhaust. So I'm gonna spray this with PB Blaster, let it soak. And same thing for all the other exhaust mounting points. I'm gonna try to get this loose. Oh, by the way, this is a E12. Now, I just want to point out that if it's this hard to undo a bolt, you should consider using heat to help break it free, and be prepared for the possibility that the bolt will break. As we'll see later, I should have tried heat. We're gonna keep going and get these nuts off. These are 13s. Easy, good. Very good. I'm gonna leave these loose so this doesn't just fall out. Work on the connectors. So we have our green wire goes to the sensor back there. Our black wire to this one. I think it's these. I'm gonna double check, but it should be this connector and this connector. So I'm gonna undo those. And a holder here. So right here we have the green one. Okay. And this goes into that holder up there. I'm gonna try to feed this out. Here's a little clip. There's a clip there. And then further up over there. And those two are the ones we have to get out of the way. The other O2 connector is in the way. Okay. It's a slightly different connector. Okay. Okay, you can't mix them up, they're different. I'm gonna keep this out of the way so that when we pull the exhaust out, it just comes with it. Alright. Yes, yes, no, yes, perfect. Same thing with the other one. Little retaining metal clip thing there. And that looks like it holds two things, kinda. Perfect, that's out, and that is free. Okay. The flange bolts from the header to this section of exhaust with the cat, they're 13s. If you're using power tools, make sure that your socket is well seated on the flange bolts so that you don't round them off. Please be turning and not rounding. Uh-oh. So this is the lower bolt from the flange, and you can see it kind of twisted the tip because when I used the impact it slipped off, because it turns out the access from under the car to this bolt is kind of off axis, so it kind of mangled the one side. See, like this is fine and all that, not so fine. Because it's off axis I couldn't get it on, so I was worried that I had damaged it too much, but we'll be ordering a replacement. And it turns out, I'm going to show you, you can actually reach in ahead of the exhaust pipe and reach up. And since I guess it kind of broke it free, or it wasn't super tight, I was able to fit in this ratcheting wrench and work this all the way out. So we're good. So the flange is up there, but right here you can kind of reach in near the engine mount over the steering column, and you can reach in up here and access the flange. So you got some room to maneuver right here, and I was able to get it out. So I think this is supposed to fit, but I think you're gonna, if you want to unscrew it from down here, you want to make sure you have your socket seated on the bolt properly before you do anything. So now that that's free, I'm gonna have to actually run this this harness above the steering, so that way it doesn't catch on it and get damaged. Moving to the rear, the bolts on the crossbar are T50. We need to remove this bar, or at least pivot it out of the way, to be able to drop the exhaust section. Got the clamp off. I've removed two 10mm bolt nuts here on this and the little clip here. You pull the center out, and then you can pull the wider part out. Same thing on the other side. That allowed me to, when I undid the bolt here, allowed me to pull the bolt out. It looks like this. And same thing on the other side. Now I was able to pivot the bar out, and it's now right here. And now I'm going to release the two nuts there, and you can drop the exhaust out.
You okay?
Oops, yeah. That will give us room to work on the starter later. So this is the clamp that holds the rear part of the exhaust on, and unfortunately the bolt that, you know, clamps it down broke. So I was able to pull it out of the part here. You know, this is the threaded piece that it screws into, and this is just the through hole that the bolt goes through. And I was able to find out that this is M8 by 1.25, so I was able to get bolts that will fit in here. So I measured it, and I think this is 60 millimeter bolt. I actually found some that were the right length, and I also found that the bolt for the front flange on the exhaust is also M8 by 1.25. So the one that I damaged, being off axis, I'll be replacing as well. And I think these are a little bit shorter. They're like 5 millimeters shorter. So I may take one of the replacements and cut it down just a little bit. Make sure the threads are clean before I put it back in. So this is one of our new bolts from the auto parts store. M8 by 1.25 by 60. It's the same length here. And so reassembled this, and I'll slot that over the piece of exhaust for later when we put it back on. Instead of being an E-Torx, it'll be the hex head. And what's nice is that these are also 13, which will match for the exhaust flange that goes to the exhaust headers up at the front. So that's really good. Right here, yeah, they are very slightly shorter up front, but I don't know if it's worth it to trim this down because the ends here are tapered, and I don't necessarily have the tools to do that quite properly. Since it's so minor, I'm going to go double check the space up on the header, but they should work just fine. Slather it with copper anti-seize and we should be just fine. Up here we have our ground right here, which is 10 millimeter, and then there's a cap that we're gonna have to remove that will remove the positive. So you really need to make sure that your battery is disconnected at this point so you don't short anything out, spark, or shock yourself. We got the 10 millimeter off to hold the ground. The cap I pried off with a screwdriver, and it was a 13 millimeter. Now we can wiggle off the positive cable. Now that's the connectors free for the starter, and our next step is going to be to remove it. So the wire's unplugged from the front of the starter. It's actually held on with 2 bolts, and those go through the transmission bell housing into the starter. There and there. So you can break them free with a longer wrench, which I've already done, and once they're both loose, you can feel, you see the starter starts to wiggle. And these are E14 E-Torx. Okay, bottom one is loose. I'm going to leave it positioned in here. If you have difficulty fitting your tool back here, you can support the starter and pull it towards the front so you get a little more room so the bolt's not bagging out and getting in the way. Else down here, we're going to try to maneuver this out, maybe pivot it and slide it out this way or over that, we'll see. Now replacement part is the Bosch SR0501N. It's nice and clean here. You can see a little bit of rust on the main part here. Everything else looks, it's really the same. That's where our ground's gonna go. That's where our positive's gonna go. And then we're gonna have to transfer this harness holder over So that should slide off. It'll slot in right here. There's a little slot there. So able to pull this off using a little right angle pick. Kind of pry it up and off. Here's a clip that retains it. So there we go. That's all set. Let's take our new starter. We're gonna put it into the left of the steering arm. There may be more room in your car to work from another angle if you don't have 4MATIC, but you know, otherwise it'll fit in here. So do not strike with hammer. Okay, I mean, this is plant too. Bam! Bam! Put it in forward, rotate the solenoid over, and you can slide it down towards the front. Okay, then move it over, rotate the solenoid over if you can. Yep. Pivot it back down. Okay. Okay. We'll get the bolt started by hand. Before torquing the starter mounting bolts to spec, we want to make sure there's no gap between the starter and the mating surface on the transmission. If it's misaligned, it could damage the flywheel, and you really don't want that. I'm going to torque those two to 40 Newton meters. Boom, there we go. Our next step is going to be to put the positive cable and the ground back on, and those are the 10mm on the ground and 13mm on the cable, and 8 Newton meters for the little one and 15 Newton meters for the big one. So if you're able to fit a torque wrench in there, that's good. Otherwise, it's it's relatively light, and there is a lock washer that comes with the new kit. So we have our 10mm right here for the ground, and I put the nut on for the positive. And to put the cap back on, I did have to reuse the nut that came off, otherwise it didn't hold. And to protect the threads and all, we went with that. Clamp here. That. With the exhaust in place, I got the header flange bolts started by hand. We're going to torque this clamp to spec, and that is 35 Newton meters. There's going to be that bolt there, that one there. The header flange bolts need to be torqued to 40 Newton meters. I was able to do this by using a combination of extensions and a wobble socket adapter to make sure the socket was seated properly on the bolts. The torque spec for the exhaust bracket is 20 Newton meters. Okay, that's the exhaust torque back in. So we're going to put this crossbar back in. There's beveled edges, and those go towards the bottom. You can also tell because right here, this is recessed where the bolts will go, and the other side is flat. So what I can do is just, since I have the part of this loosened, slot this in, and then back here, pull this down, and swing it in. That lets you align it. I'm going to reach in and put this bolt in the far end. So if you encounter any resistance, make sure it's not because you're cross-threading, because you don't want to force this in and then ruin the threads. The closest thing I could find for torque spec for this seems like it's cross connection left rear to right rear. It's 20 Newton meters in the manual, unless that's the bracket over there. But I think this is probably a reasonable torque spec. Let's see. Yep. There we go. That's the rear install. Now we have to put these back in. These are plastic 10mm nuts that hold this in. Actually, this one goes on this side. So you're gonna bring those in hand tight. Just lightly snug because you don't want to strip it. Same thing on this side. Now we're going to put the clips back in. These are, once again, the type that you pull the center out so the top will squish and release. And we can put that in. So you'll slot it in and push the center pin in, which will lock it in. I accidentally damaged this one on this side. So I have a Christmas tree clip that's a comparable size and not going to be too difficult to remove. That will go in here. And that won't go anywhere. And that's all the rear done. Now in here I've routed the O2 sensor cables or wires out of the way, so the black one runs here into that bracket there and comes out right here. The green one runs back there next to the starter into the clip. Oh, I have it under the clip. Let me redo that. Boom. And then in that clip right here, between these two hard lines and over here. So I'm going to connect the rear one, the black one. And it'll click in together and tuck back here into its little bracket. And connect these two. Need some more slack. So that slots in here. That one slots there. I'm going to put this in that holder right there. And do the same on the starter up there. And it's all out of the way. Everything's connected again. And that is everything you have to do to do the starter. Last step is going to be to put those back in, but we're actually going to do an oil change first. So when it's like right here, drain bolt right here, pretty simple, and then we'll put the panels back up. So the starter's in and everything's back together. But before we start the car up, I'm going to take care of one other thing that the car's been complaining about, and that's the auxiliary battery. The car's been showing an auxiliary battery malfunction message intermittently, and it's just getting on my nerves at this point. So it's time to replace that. So to change your auxiliary battery, you're going to open this panel up, which is held in with 3 clips. It'll pop out like that and out. You want to be careful because there's 2 hooks right there that slide in. So once you pop them out, just slide it back. And these are extra wires for a dash cam, but what we're looking for is this box right here. The little black box right there. That's held in with this 10mm bolt right here. So as soon as the bolt is undone, that cage drops off. I've rotated the cage that holds it. You can see the 2 connectors up there. So then I'm going to be able to pop this out and through the opening. So I've got that here, so I'm going to unplug those connectors. A new battery here. Slide that back in. get a little more room to exit from the bottom, you can remove the 3 T25 screws that hold the plastic panel on. And then you can work it back into this cage, and then we're going to put it back into position. It feels good in there. Let's back in. Now all we have to do, if you don't have any extra wires, is just put the panel back on and close it up. We're just going to zip tie these back into position like we had them, and close it up, and then pop this back up. There we go. Alright, and just put the bottom back on. After a few months of slow, long cranks to start it, let's see how it does now. That sounds like success. So one thing to note, if you have one of these E-classes, the W212 with air suspension, and quick jacks with the extensions, you will have to raise it up into high mode if it starts to settle after you've lowered the quick jacks to actually get them out. Yeah. And that's it. It's back to starting up really quickly, and our auxiliary battery message is gone. So that wraps up our projects on this car for now. But if you're here to watch me bring very cheap, really broken European cars back from the brink, don't worry, we'll be back to our regular programming very soon. If this video helped you out, leave a like, and let me know in the comments what you think the worst cheap European car is to work on. Chances are, you might see it soon. And if that sounds exciting to you, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.